So let me introduce everyone while we get the mics ready. So Alan Martinson is right next to me. Alan Martinson is a partner at MVTP, a venture capital firm that, as Aldous just said, is prominently investing in a lot of startups in the region. And he's a veteran of a lot of companies in the Baltic states. Next to him is Carlos Eduardo Espinal, who is a partner at Seedcamp, an accelerator investment program based in London. As a global program and has, I think as of yesterday, 6 Estonian startups in the program. In the middle, John Bradford, Managing Director of Springboard, also starting Difference Engine, and as of today, one of the key guys launching Wise Guys and the Mafia attack on Riga. And then we have Preet Saloma, who's co-founder and member of the board Garage 48. And Bien Margus Udam, who's from Ambient Sound Investments, which is the investment company founded by the original Skype developers, and has invested in a lot of Baltic startups. So I think we might be, does everyone have a mic there?
Hope so, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So we can leave this for the rest. All right, John.
So I have the unenviable task of actually having to deal with these guys. I'm actually really privileged to be sitting amongst these guys because these are guys that actually have taken their money out of their pocket and actually invest regularly and work with teams in this region. So we're not talking about abstracts here, we're actually talking about real live people who are committing cash to the table, which is unusual and should be commended. I would actually like each of you to introduce yourselves and a quick background on your experience of Baltics, what you've done, what sector, what size, and what you typically look for in terms of businesses. Do you want to start, Alan?
Yeah. Is the mic working?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So my name is Alan Martinson, managing partner of MTVP, which is a Tallinn-based technology investment partnership, and my co-partner Andres is back over there. So basically, we have been investing from a vehicle which we raised in 2005, and it's fully invested in 10 companies. Half of it, those companies have already been exited. And in parallel, in the last couple of years, we have been also launching new companies as founders or angel investors. So Cherry was one of them. So there is a company called Baltic and a company called Kurat.com. So, and most of our activities are within 2-hour flight radius from the Baltics. So it's Russia, Ukraine, Finland, and the Baltics. So in the past, both me and Andres, we have been doing different companies in the Baltics, and the Baltic News Service, Delphi, Microlink, involved in Softechnica. So it's like 23 years of experience.
Carlos?
Excellent, thanks. Just to get a feeling for, how many people here have heard of Seedcamp? Just to get a... Excellent. All right, so I won't go into the details of it. I mean, we are a global accelerator program. I think that's the name du jour. But what we try to do is really bring the investor community closer to the cities where a lot of the cool talent is coming out from. And I think that it's very exciting how much talent comes out from this particular region. As John said earlier, we were proud to announce yesterday our new investment in Estonian company Pult.io, which I think they're here somewhere. Anyway.
Oh, wait.
Hey! Congrats, guys. So if you guys want to chat with those guys, I would highly recommend that. But in terms of what we do, yes, we are 63. We have 63 companies. We travel all over the world, having events where companies come to present and meet our mentor network. We have over 2,000 plus mentors. We have our investor base is 30 plus investors of the top tier. So it's a great way of bringing startups from the best regions to the key people with money, and then making the right connections. Next week, we're going to be taking our companies to the United States on a four-week trip across the United States to Boston, New York, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, Seattle, and Austin, introducing them to all the venture firms there and all the major corporate and biz partners that they could potentially partner with. So we try to create an environment where we find the best companies from the key engineering hubs, and then we take them, introduce them to the world and all the key partnerships that they need to grow.
Preet, I know you don't necessarily put your hand in your pocket, but you spend a lot of time and effort and hours unpaid to actually help the community at the really bottom end of the market in the nicest possible way.
Yeah, hi, my name is Priit Salum. I'm the co-founder of Garage 48 initiative. I'm not actually, as the other guys are, real investors. Yeah. I have only invested in one company. This is my own company. And the sum of money was only half year's worth of salary, I would say. So I'm on the other, like a receiving end, I would say here. But yeah, so Garage, how many of you know Garage 48? Yeah, a bit as the same as Seed Camp. Yeah. So basically, it's a weekend hackathon. If you haven't participated yet, do that. You have the next possibility. On 23rd of March in Tallinn, we're doing a Garage 48 in cooperation with Tallinn Music Week. So there's a next chance, and yeah, we are a kind of hackathon which has its own approach to a weekend startup event. We differ quite a lot of the other events where we try to create let's say a dream team in a way where all the possible parts are there which are essential for startups. But my own background is more like I've been working in startups, and currently I'm working in a company which I like to see big at some point. Thanks.
Hi. I'm representing Ambient Sound Investments. That is probably not so well known as Seed Camp or Garage 48, so I don't ask to raise your hands, just in case. Ambient Sound Investments is early stage investor based in Tallinn, founded by Skype co-founders for Estonian software engineers. And we have invested totally right now by since 2006, and the total portfolio is I believe 27 companies by now. They are not only from Baltics. We have 2 companies in Finland, in UK, in US, also in Asia. So we have seen quite a pipeline around the world. And lately, previously we have done also very early stage investments, but right now we have moved a little bit to A round. The minimum investment we would consider is something like around 300,000–400,000 euros as the first tranche. So looking a bit on the later side as well.
Cool. I think what's interesting is what you can see here is a spectrum of capital across the board. What I'd like actually to ask is, I'm really interested in, because you sit in particular parts of the ecosystem, you clearly have parts which feed in and pieces which feed out of where you're at. I'd like to understand what you think works really well in the Baltics and where your personal frustrations lie in terms of either getting teams out the other end and or seeing teams coming in from the bottom, or actually whether you actually believe there are any issues in the immediate Baltic region. I'm going to start with Preet, because you actually have the hard job of pushing everything upward.
Yeah, thanks. You didn't actually introduce yourself, did you?
I'm not meant to speak.
Okay. John is a great guy.
So my name's John Bradford. I run something called Springboard, and half the time I'm friendly with Carlos, and half the time we're fighting with each other in the nicest possible way. I have very strong mutual respect for him, and I don't say that lightly. I genuinely think he's a really nice guy. I do something slightly different. I run an accelerator, but I physically lock people in a room for 13 weeks. I push pizza under the door. I let them out to go to the toilet every so often. It's a very, very physical process. we sit in, yeah, you get to know a lot about the people that you really didn't want to know about. But we effectively, we do a lot of the kind of the shaping, the bashing, the try and get people into the right space to try and get either failure out really quickly or to actually help them progress to the next level very, very rapidly. But it's, I think sort of what's important, and I always say to people, is it's only a bit of the system. People spend too much time fixated with accelerators are the solution. They're not a solution, they're a part of the system. I also believe with what Mike says is there will be a very Darwinian approach going forward. I think that's a good thing for you guys, it's a bad thing for our investors. But guess what? That's the position we're in, and whilst there's demand in the market to push out accelerators, you should take advantage of it. Anyways.
Yeah. Okay. You asked what's good and what's bad. We were actually having a discussion with a fellow startupper of mine when we drove here from Tartu on the bus, and one thing we both agreed on this topic was that it has been great to see that during the last 5 years there has been a boom of different kind of activities, people realizing that startups are cool, that you can make something your own, and there is maybe money out there to support your ideas. 5 years ago we didn't have any hackathons, we didn't have these big networking events like Open Coffee or Mobile Monday and so on, but today we have these app camps in Lithuania, we have Garage 48 in Latvia and Estonia, we have Startup Weekend happening here and there. We have a lot of activities on the grassroots level where people are basically educated or let's say the promotion is made for a startup culture in a way, and this is something I really enjoy. We as a Garage 48 team have our own small part of that as well, and this is something which is really good to see. One thing what frustrates me, and I think other Garage 48 founders share this opinion as well, is that we have those big exits in the past. I could say that there are 2 big startups in Estonia which are really well known and which have actually played their exits or their option money for the developers have played this role of popularizing the way of working and the startups as such, and these are Skype and Playtech. I'm talking only in the scope of Estonia, and what frustrates me is that we still have so few of those glamorous exits or these big experience creators there. But hopefully we will have those more in time. Yeah. So these are 2 views, I could say that.
Carlos, you spend your life investing in Baltic teams. Was it 5 out of 20 last year came from the Baltic region?
Yeah, it was like, yeah.
Yeah. So you probably know as much about investing in this region as any.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the region, first of all, the way that Seed Camp works, we're lucky in the sense that people come to us. So we'll go to an event, and then people will come to the event. So to some extent, what I see is the cream of a country saying, hey, actually, I want to go and apply to this event, maybe fly a couple of countries. But in terms of sort of what's going on internally, it's probably best represented by the people living it. So I took a poll of our companies from Estonia, and I said, guys, I asked them 2 questions. I said, what could improve in the Baltic region to promote entrepreneurship? And I asked them, what things are preventing there to be more entrepreneurship in the Baltic region? And so I got some interesting replies, and some of them which you kind of alluded to, but I'll give you an example. In terms of what are preventing more entrepreneurship from happening in the region, Andrus from Pult said that there's obviously a lack of capital as one component, and there's some lack in support from the state, and this is obviously specific to Estonia. Yeah. But he was talking about how in an Estonian Kickstart fund, they're asking them about revenues and when are they going to have revenues, and when are they going to what are they actually doing with the money if they're not producing revenues. And so you know, this alludes to another point that another one of the founders mentioned, is that it's Christopher from Finland, which he said, look, there's a problem with the whole notion of entrepreneurship. It's frowned upon. Instead of something that's exciting, it's something that is sort of inward facing. A lot of startups I saw were concerned with building something for local markets. We're slowly gone past that in Finland, and Estonia is doing that too, but Lithuania and Latvia are still fighting that. So there's a little bit of an educational hurdle there, which is maybe the flip side. So on the one side, it's you need larger exits to draw out that. But on the flip side, you need to have more sort of, I'll give you another example. Christo from TransferWise says, technical comp sci education needs to be modernized with more applied and practical studies. We're finding it hard to move away from the Soviet Chinese lecture-based model. We produce great young coders if we're lucky, but only rarely creators. So that's from like the other end of the spectrum.
Absolutely. I know, Alan, you have some very strong views, and you've heard them recently about government intervention. Do you think, well, going to the question of where do you see the bottlenecks in the system, and do you think, I'll ask the question, do you think government intervention is required, or they should just stay well out of it?
So, short answer to the government question is probably no, and not at least in its kind of standard form. So governments can't create startups, and they can't bring them up, so they can facilitate the environment. But I believe the biggest bottleneck, I mean, first of all, I mean, we're living in very interesting times. So never before has a Baltic startup community been so big, so successful. I mean, 10% of seed company investment from Estonia, 15% roughly from the Baltics if you add on Latvia and Lithuania ones. So on angel list we have from Estonia alone like 45 companies, and Finland has 71. So Estonia is number 2 country in the world in terms of angel list density per capita, and after the United States, Israel comes number 3. So basically we have all the reasons to congratulate ourselves. But the biggest problem, I think, a little bottleneck is size of our countries. And now if we are creating so many successful startups, which are essentially just small teams with a kind of very early stage product, which have been very successful. And the biggest problem now is to scale them into companies, into real companies, which have tens or even hundreds or even thousands of people, which have revenues, which are job creators, and which create nice exits in the end. So, and I think here we have the biggest problem because we just don't have enough people. So there is no way how all those tens of startups in the Baltics could suddenly scale into world-class companies and stay in the Baltics. So just no way. So we don't have managers, we don't have developers, so almost anybody. So, and that's why we need to think of a system how we could bring those young startups out from the Baltics. And here is the biggest challenge for governments, because I mean, natural desire for any government and any politician is to bring companies to their countries, not to push them out from the countries. So, and today, if you take, for example, Enterprise Estonia, which has been quite generous in giving government grants. I mean, they can give it only to the companies who are registered in Estonia, even if they are founded by foreigners. So same time, if let's say 10 Estonian founders go to America and set up a company over there, they become unfundable in terms of Estonian government grants, which is nonsense. I believe those guys may do more for Estonians and foreigners and just sitting on Estonian grant money in Tallinn. So, and that is kind of philosophical question, and how we shall handle it. So how we shall generate a greater system, how to really boost those startups out from the Baltics, help them to set up in America, in London, and be happy with that.
Mm-hmm. Margus, your initial funders were clearly successful entrepreneurs who put their money where their mouth is, and puts you in a unique position because they kind of have seen both ends of the system. What do you perceive as, well, what do you think is good, and what do you think is where do your frustrations lie?
I would say that during the last 2 or 3 years, quality of pipeline and quality of startups, it has increased tremendously. And we have chance to compare to the pipeline from UK or US. Few things stands out, and they are somewhat obvious. Of course, experience. and most probably you would see the background from US. They're more experienced, more senior people, and so on. And I would say this just comes with time, and it is getting better and better with success stories we have right now. I would maybe two things to point out. What is really missing? I would say the level of angel investors, or the amount of angel investors, angel funding, is pretty critical. It's too low. I think all the Baltic startups, they basically don't have problems. So it's getting A round, the good ones, the A round from outside of Baltics. The funding doesn't need to come from Baltics. It makes sense to move your startup to the place where your customers, where your partners are, and we have also seen that when you have really good technology, you have competitive advantage, you have good technical team, it is even quite easy to attract senior CEOs from US. So I would say that the human resource is not limitation, and the funding is not limitation if you take it from A round to further on. But the seed funding and angel funding is somewhat a critical issue. And having a bit, the discussion about the government funding and government role on that. I also have background in public sector. I worked for Minister of Finance as Deputy Secretary General, so I know both sides of it. And the bit of problem we have in Europe is that governments are actually competing with some startup funding. And it really does not support the idea that is very popular in US, fail fast. If it doesn't take off, close it down, take something else, move on fast. Government funding usually allows to take it a bit longer and then to realize that it doesn't work out. Of course, I must say that there are also the positive side of it. We just can't say that it's negative. So for a number of hard technologies where there's a strong IP, there is long sales cycle, usually early stage investors don't have so much funding in this region to cover it. But if I had a chance, I would eliminate the government funding from Europe at all.
I've just suddenly realised, and maybe I'm just because I'm either a little bit hungover or a bit stupid, probably a bit of both, is actually, apart from Carlos and myself, everybody sitting on this panel is Estonian. Why? Why? What should these guys be learning? Because this is meant to be a Baltic, and I'm not suggesting you're not, but is it not interesting that technically in the Baltics you're the smallest country, but it appears that you're making the biggest, well, you're sitting all here having this conversation. What differs it from Estonia, and what would you recommend to other people within the region, and I include Finland in that they should be doing to help themselves, so to speak?
I need to mention that Carlos is the biggest angel investor in Estonia, so you're almost Estonian. But I've been doing business in the Baltics last 20 years actually, and I consider myself rather a kind of Baltic citizen than Estonian citizen. And I would actually like to shut down this discussion as quickly as possible in order not to create the kind of international scandal here, because it's still an endless story. We can discuss it next 2 days, who is best in the Baltics. So basically Estonians have been always very good in kind of PR and marketing themselves, and not only in startup, but at the same time, if you go further south, you can find very solid companies who are not maybe not so much speaking about themselves. Yeah. Take GetShare, for example, which is the most interesting and the biggest high-tech company in the Baltics today, which is, contrary to Skype, it has been founded in Lithuania by Lithuanians, and they are still, let's say, very much Lithuanian. So I think this must be taken into account and respected as well.
I would say that actually there are in the public, at least Vitaly from Ruvilite could be actually sitting in my place here and probably giving you better answers. I think it's just the setup of this panel somehow, which is a stone into the garden of the organizers.
It might actually be what you described, is you're much more PR savvy or less shameless in terms of your promotion of trying to be heard.
We like ourselves.
Actually, I truly believe that that we should somewhat forget in terms of startup ecosystem and startup environment, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. We should really kind of delete the borders here and look at the region as one. And I really have temptation to have Finland in this region as well. If you just take the population, if I'm not wrong, we represent 0.07% of the world population. If you take the Baltic countries together. So if you take it country by country, and you even might have kind of competing thinking, then it's definitely not good. So we should consider ourselves as one region and then building one ecosystem to create somewhat significant hotspot for startups in Europe.
Okay. Making the conversation a little less abstract about investment in economies and governments. I'm guessing we're sitting in a room full of startups who want to progress and be successful and move forward in what they do. You spend your lives in front of startups. Some get money, some don't. Some succeed, some don't. On a personal level, I'm just thinking about advice. What is it that you look for? What is it that you want to see more of? What really frustrates you? I spend most of my life getting really angry at people because I see the talent, but it's kind of misdirected sometimes. I mean, do you have any specific advice? Let's start, Alan, in terms of what should these guys be doing to be getting your attention in terms of money?
I believe, I mean, today, if I take this room, most of all, it reminds me elementary school. So we are today in a situation where most of the companies and very successful companies, startups, they are still very, very early stage. And I believe we have extremely good ecosystem and extremely good elementary school. This is the first 4 years of classes, and what you learn most of all in the first 4 years in a school is not so much about maths or let's say skills. It teaches you about how to live your life and how to take some responsibility for yourself and teaches you some values. So and I believe it's the most important thing what we have been learning from each other here. So, but the biggest thing what I would advise for everybody in this room is to learn more, not only from, let's say, people next door or the next building, but buy a one-way ticket to somewhere. Would it be London, would it be even Helsinki or the United States, and really compare yourself with people who are in much more bigger and more competitive world. And this makes wonders. I've been seeing tens of most Estonian startup businessmen going to the United States and transforming themselves very quickly, like in 3 to 6 months, and becoming really world-class entrepreneurs. So, and you need to get out from this region in order to become fundable, in order to become something.
Okay. Carlos, you see more than the average. You're in like the top percentile.
But you know, the thing is, his point is I think very key in how a lot of the companies that we see make it to the next step, which is seeing beyond the local market. One of the things that I highly praise the Baltic startups for is I have yet to see a single seed camp applicant from this region that doesn't have a product built that looks awesome and works really well. Like, I don't know what they feed you guys, but like you come up with really cool stuff that works and is very, very far relative to your peers across the rest of Europe. So that to me says, look, there's a whole bunch of raw engineering talent. And in terms of what we look for, we're less, yes, a business model is important, but that's partially kind of what we help you with. But if there isn't a viable product that is of use to someone, then that's usually not going to get you very far in terms of our level of interest. And then the next bit is this something that is beyond the local market? So again, I think it's and I'm going to use Poland as a contrast. With Poland, the market is big enough that you see a split between the startups coming there that are actually just addressing the Polish market, can be cash flow break even on the Poland market alone, or even with Russia is another example. And then you have this dichotomy between, do you fund this business to be as big as it can as the key player in this one geography, or is it a global market? And I think you guys are blessed with the opportunity to think global from birth, call it good or bad. But so those are the things that sort of what we look for, really.
Absolutely, and I'd strongly support that. So the thing I think is really wonderful about you guys is that when you write your first line of code, it's typically for an international market because your markets are so damn small. And it's a really, really positive thing. But you need to get your head into that space and think global from day zero. And the strength of your English actually puts you in a very strong position relative to a lot of other European countries. Anyway.
Not only English, also German and Russian we speak quite well. But I have a very deep technical background myself and less investment background and no marketing background whatsoever.
But you run your own business.
Yeah, so I'm learning all the time. But I think there are several things small things I would start to recommend fellow entrepreneurs, startuppers. The first thing, which actually concerns this quality of implementation already when you see the people coming into seed camp, is that try to bootstrap. Go as long as you can without investment. Try to sell your company or the shares of your company to the investors as expensive for them as you can. So this basically means that if you have talent somewhere lying around, or maybe yourself, who can code and somebody who can design, try to do the first prototype before you go to the investor. It basically enables you to illustrate your idea, what it does, what's the product, and it also puts you ahead of these guys who just show a piece of paper. So I'm completely for bootstrapping. The second thing is, actually adding to Martin's comment, is Alan's comment, sorry. I was thinking on the last name. Is that we could take this panel as bitching about our investment climate or what's wrong here. For example, the size is something we can't bitch about. It's there. Our markets are so small. Think big, day one. Don't think Estonian, Latvia and Lithuania market. Think European market. Think UK, US, or Russia. And one thing I especially like, and which has actually guided myself through my life, is that take the courage to take the crazy decisions or these decisions you're afraid of. Basically, going abroad, failing fast. This is really hard to do, actually. To fail fast is damn hard, but try to do that. Go run your test. If nobody's interested in a product, just throw it away, take next one. And that's it. This is, let's say, the software developer, bootstrapper point of view from this region.
Margus?
Just adding to Alan's point, moving companies out of this region, I'm personally quite a big supporter to the idea, and we consider our funding quite often the funding that allows a startup to move out of this region, or to hire senior management from a board, or to fundraise from US, from Europe, and so on. But it might definitely make sense to keep the R&D, product development, back office in this region. If you take the Skype, they have office. So the biggest office of Skype is in Tallinn, 350 engineers or so, and in these days, this is of course a very good source for startup founders as well. So I mean, It depends. It's just not only get out and so on, but it makes, in many cases actually, it makes sense to keep IP in this region with your development and R&D team. So all sides into account.
Cool. I'm going to open up the questions to the audience. Yeah.
How do you see what is the most thing that startups are missing? Why do you have to turn them down or something? What is the thing that's missing?
Who wants to answer that question?
Maybe it's a bit old-fashioned, but what we would like to understand in most cases also where the competitive advantage really is. The team might be less experienced, we can nothing to do that, and we can add on to that, and so on. But quite often, that it's either no real product or no real competitive advantage if you really think big and if you take into account the global players.
May I just add to it, I'm not investing so actively anymore, but when we did like a few years ago, we went through around 500 business plans or requests for funding per year, 2 per day in average. And around half of them failed in the first meeting to a simple, what we call Google test. When you have an entrepreneur on the opposite side of the table and he tells how nice and great idea he has, and then you just Google and you find like 10 or 20 companies doing the same. So, and he has no idea about half of them, and he has no way to describe what he's doing differently. And that's amazing. So many people are still inventing bicycles here.
So, it's interesting. It's a very good question because if you look at it from the competitive landscape, a lot of the B2C businesses that we'll see on a given month are repeats of the same ones from last month and the last one before it, like contextual behavior advertising network or location-based check-in type thing. Like there's a lot of things that come up, and basically to your point, some are aware, some are not. So what I would emphasize really is we spend a lot of time trying to assess the quality of the team. And that's a very subjective thing, and it comes from having seen a lot of these guys. And I think the biggest attribute is the ability for the team to hustle. So sometimes they don't know the answer, but they know how to get the answer, and they'll come very well prepared. And you can tell by the way you ask questions, they'll be like, they might know their competitors, or they know how they're different from their competitors. Because frankly, you remember when Twitter came out, there was like 4 or 5 other microblogging services, and you could have passed. But the fact of the matter is that what made it what it was the vision and the way that Jack basically was led by his user base and understanding how the user base metrics are. So what we look for are those attributes in our founding teams, because we know that's what's going to make them stand above the noise if there is noise in that specific sector. Of course, if they come with the flux capacitor, then of course we'll invest in that. Right?
Just to add to that, there's a really interesting dynamic. It's really hard to explain until you've seen it. When an investor asks you a question, there's a way to answer it which is succinctly and to the point and not to waffle too long, because actually you can over-talk an answer on occasions. And sometimes somebody who just basically says you ask a question and you nail it. And even if you don't know it, basically say that's a good point, I'll come back to you on that. When you kind of get into this BS, that's kind of, you just kind of think, I just want to leave this conversation. It's just filling space for filling space sake. I don't know. I mean, it's really hard. We're fortunate that we sit and we listen to this all the time.
I mean, you're assessing 2 things in the team. You're assessing, one, their ability to get new business partnerships, how to convince new users to join their service or a new partner for it's a B2B type thing. But the other thing you're also trying to figure out is whether or not these people are going to be able to talk to new investors, right? Because as soon as we invest, as soon as John invests, and any one of us here invest, they're pretty much out fundraising 6 months later. So you need to be able you need to look at this guy and say, okay, I can help you, but I can't recreate you. So if you are inherently not capable of communicating to an investor community, you're going to have this uphill struggle for the next 4 years throughout your entire funding cycle. So
this is exactly one criteria we look at as well. Can we help you to fundraise? And the requirements, of course, in terms of phases are also different ones. We just helped one of our portfolio companies to fundraise for 2 million euros, and we went through, I believe, over 100 investors in US and Europe, tier 1, tier 2, and so on. And for A and B round, of course, the experience management is prerequisite. There is no questions at all. You have to have it by that time. But interestingly, still, we pitched $1 billion market size as addressable market. And in most cases, $1 billion is not acceptable. It's just so small, we can't invest.
Do you have one more question? Yeah. One more question?
Yeah, well, I'm paid to ask questions. I have to do that. But, yeah, Juris Kaja from the Latvian news agency Leta. All of you, at the end of the day, invest money, cash, or something in these companies. But what can you contribute as investors, seed or round, whatever, besides money? What can you how can you shepherd these people along? What kind of knowledge can you give them? What kind of assistance, advice? What is the non-monetary value of dealing with any of you?
Actually, why don't you answer this question? This is a great one for you to answer.
It's actually a great question for me because I don't give them any money, or very, very little. I effectively starve people. I give them enough money, so typically you get £5,000 per founder, 2-3 person teams, 10 or 15,000 euros or pounds. And it's actually, having done it enough times, I know you can barely live on it. It also means that you don't go out and you spend more time on your product. We effectively, as I described, we just have this physical 13-week bootcamp program where we bring people to you. So it's like the biggest personalized event in the world. Instead of you going and finding mentors and investors, you sit in the middle of the room and they come to you. We have a structured program, which basically means that we spend our life challenging what you do, challenge your assumptions, I crowdsource. I don't do anything. I stand in the middle and direct the traffic. And I use my mentors shamelessly, who give up their time for free, which is really cool, to actually help the teams to try and break down all of the mistakes they've made, to actually explain, to make introductions. Look, the world we exist in means that competition is harder and tougher as it exists, and actually time to market is actually becoming exceptionally important. So what's a good idea today will definitely not be a good idea in 12 months' time. That ability to compress that thinking process is really valuable, and we use smart people around us to make that happen. I mean, it's
13 weeks, that's the length of the United States Marines basic training, is that?
Yeah, that's why we call it boot camp. And we do actually, the more I learn about what happens in the military, the more I actually realize we do something very similar, which is we actually break people down over the first month and actually really challenge them and challenge the underlying assumptions, and then start to try and build them back with the knowledge that exists around people. Anyway, sorry. Alan, you're an entrepreneur and also...
I'm not a classical investor, and so currently we don't provide any funding, so we have a partnership which launches and manages companies. So, and if there is any great idea and you could really think that it would fit into our very limited portfolio, so in this case we can talk, but we are currently not kind of portfolio investors per se. So.
Yeah.
So our program is year long, and once you're in the program, you're in it for life, effectively. So it's spread out, I guess, as long as you want to come to our events. And we have companies from multiple years ago still coming. And what we'll have is we'll take the entire year and we'll split it into months, into certain curricula, if you think of it in terms of universities. And every month we'll have seed camp days where only our invested companies can come and meet mentors that will talk about specific subjects. Last month we had Eric Ries come to speak at our seed camp day, and basically all the seed camp companies had a day alone with Eric Ries to talk about lean methodology. So we have that every month, and we'll talk about PR, corporate finance, anything, M&A. Then there's the mentor network that we have that are constantly helping the companies. We have the trips that we organize, like the one that I mentioned earlier, where we take them and we introduce them to everyone. Obviously, the time that I spend and Rasmus spends with them. But to some extent, it's about helping them meet the right people, and then having the context in which the Q&A can be done without having them to make those relationships personally.
Great. You don't have money, but how would you differentiate yourself from, say, Startup Weekend and all those sorts of guys?
Okay.
It's different.
I was actually thinking a long time what I would answer actually on this question, because I don't have any money. I've actually been reading the text on the other wall. The only source of knowledge is experience and Albert Einstein, which is a big problem because we have few experience here in Baltics. We should have more. But usually what I can personally do if somebody comes and asks something from me is actually give my experience. What I've seen here in my company or in Garage 48, this is something I can tell them. They usually bootstrap technical stuff and so on. But how does Garage 48 differ from other hackathons or boot camps or Startup Weekend, for example, is the fact that when we started, we thought that we all were with a background of startup. So I was just actually sacked for a portfolio company of Asi, and I had a very good learning 2 years in this company. And what we saw in the gang who did the Garage 48 was that every team needs somebody who knows about marketing. If you don't have that, you will definitely fail. Somebody who is very good at technical stuff. If you don't have a developer implementer, you will fail on that. And if you don't have a designer who will make the product appealing, you will fail. And then there are visionaries and other people as well. So when we started with Garage 48 as a hackathon or weekend event, we thought that we have to pre-profile the people who come to the event, and we will only form teams which have all the key ingredients in them. And this is something which I think we did really right. And of course, aside that, we as this kind of organization are basically offering a very intensive weekend entrepreneurship and team building coaching, basically. So if a couple of friends can come together and they want to do an idea, implement an idea, we show that you can do it on the lean budget with a small team and a short time period to get to the first prototype. You can go and show the investor.
And I have to definitely give you big kudos, because 2 of our companies are from Garage 48, and so they're very high quality, and it's a testament to the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, basically 2 things on a practical level stands out. The first thing is hiring, and then helping to hire particularly senior management team. The second thing in early stage is very critical thing is fundraising. If you don't have really customer traction yet, or customers not approved for cash flow, then the fundraising is ultimate truth if you have something or not. And really preparing and going through the fundraising process. We are right now leading 2 processes for our portfolio companies, and we are able to introduce the company basically worldwide to high quality investors. So it's on the very practical level. But of course, I must say we have our limitations too. For example, if the main purpose is from us to get business-to-business introductions in US, then we have limits. Most probably we are not helpful and right investor.
Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for your attention and your honest answers. I think the stage is yours now.
Thank you very much.